Welcome to NCSS Here for You. Since 1958, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to high-quality services which promote healthy living and emotional well-being to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. We take our role in the community seriously and strive to provide the highest quality services. According to Eric Erickson, a noted developmental psychologist, every person must pass through a series of 8 interrelated stages over the entire life cycle. NCSS provides a continuum of services to meet the needs of individuals who at any point seek assistance. NCSS's purpose is creating a stronger community, one person at a time. Now, let's get to today's show.
I'm Joe Halko, Director of Community Relations for Northwestern Counseling and Support Services, and welcome to another episode of NCSS Here for You. Each month on this program, we discuss a human services topic, and we do that with staff from one of our 3 service divisions. Our 3 service divisions are Behavioral Health Services, Children, Youth, and Family Services, and Developmental Services. And on occasion, like this month, we have guests from organizations that NCSS collaborates with throughout the year. This month's episode is titled United Way of Northwest Vermont. The date was April 1st, 2016. It's been slightly over a year since the Franklin Grand Isle United Way merged with the United Way of Chittenden County. Many people have asked what impact has that had on our local community. Others have expressed that they don't understand the United Way, what it does to improve lives and strengthen our community. So to discuss the impact that the United Way of Northwest Vermont strives to achieve in our community, I'm pleased to introduce this month's guests. And they are Molly Lambert, Interim Executive Director, Amy Carmola, Director of Community Impact, and Paul Chapman, Community Impact Manager for Franklin and Grand Isle counties. And I want to welcome all of you to the show today.
You.
Thanks for being here. So let's start by tell us about the United Way of Northwest Vermont.
Isn't it always good to know what you're talking about, Joe? As you stated earlier, I just want to start by saying thank you to Northwest Counseling and Support Services, not only for the opportunity today, but for being such a great partner of United Way. And the United Way of Northwest Vermont, my goodness, we are a region. We are people who live in a very related region. Mm-hmm. We work in different places, we live in different places. We cross those county borders more times a day than we can count. And that's why it's so important that we, the United Way, operate as a region. And I want to tell you the mission, I think, is just great. Our mission is to build a stronger Northwest Vermont through harnessing the power of people in our community to improve people's lives. And I know that sounds a little jargonish, but when you take it apart, it's really powerful. And we've put some expectations alongside that mission. We expect all children and all young adults to achieve their potential, all. We expect all people to meet their basic needs and achieve financial stability. And we expect all in our region to maintain optimal health and well-being. Those are pretty aspirational goals to put next to that mission. But I think it's important that those are our goals. And the way United Way accomplishes those goals or moves toward accomplishing those goals is by using our volunteers throughout our region to really lead our work. Many agencies utilize volunteers certainly to accomplish their work. United Way actually has volunteers leading their work. They determine on a regular time interval, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities that we need to build on? So we've got a group of folks doing that, and then we have a group of folks who actually determine how we spend those precious resources that folks in this community, employers, individuals, organizations, so generously contribute to United Way, trusting that investment is made wisely. So that's kind of the overview of the United Way of Northwest Vermont.
And you had mentioned one other thing, Molly, that I think is very important, and that is the fact that it is local and that the dollars that are raised locally are also distributed and utilized locally. They don't go outside of the region that this United Way covers.
It is a regional allocation, right.
Now, what are United Way's priorities and how are they being identified?
So we just went through an amazing, almost 2-year process to reset our priorities. And this is something, as Molly said, we do periodically, intentionally, is that United Way, our volunteers and staff, connect with partners and with community in a very thoughtful way to try and understand what are the most important issues that the community wants United Way to be addressing. And those shift slightly over time, and that's our intention, is to be responsive to the needs of the community. So we just completed a process where we engaged with almost 800 people across the region. We looked at a lot of data, looked at other needs assessments that were completed, particularly by the hospitals, pulled a lot of information and input and perspective together. And when I say we, I mean the volunteers that oversee and direct all of United Way's work. And then those volunteers identified a clear set of strategies for United Way moving forward for the next 5 to 7 years. And those strategies should be no surprise to anyone, because they were consistent messages that we heard across the region, across our partners, from donors, from community members. They are that United Way's priorities will be to reduce substance abuse, promote mental health, meet basic needs, and by basic needs I mean transportation, food, housing, and health care. That we will advance employment and support families. So those are some big, broad, essential strategies that United Way heard very clearly from the community that we should be working on that. And now our volunteer committees and teams are looking at how can United Way work with the community and how can we contribute to efforts to address those priorities. And that's sort of our next step of work. We have a lot of different types of resources and roles that United Way can play, and there's a very thoughtful process to say what is it that's most needed, what will best complement what important community partners are doing. So that's our next step with our priorities.
And don't you think, Amy, it's important to note that United Way is so immersed in the region and working with partners like NCSS and others, we know that there's very good work going on in our region. So how do we make sure that we're boosting those efforts?
Yeah, and I think, from a perspective of someone who might be watching this not that familiar, it's the fact that what you're really doing is it's just a collaboration of organizations, individuals, donors to try to address the most pressing needs in all the communities on a local level, whatever those might be. And Amy did a great job of expressing what they are right now. And speaking of volunteers, which is such a critical component in this entire mix, what is the role of volunteers in deciding what the United Way does in our community?
So I'll say a little bit about that. The volunteers play the lead role from the beginning to, throughout our process of what United Way does in the community. So they determine the priorities that we will focus on, and then they also determine the investment of resources. So for example, many people know that United Way funds programs across our region that are providing really important and high quality services to the community. And those programs apply for funding from United Way, and we have teams of volunteers that review the applications, weigh the opportunities, and make the decisions around how much funding and which programs receive funding. And they do that on a 3-year cycle. Those volunteers also make recommendations and decisions for how United Way can invest additional financial resources to help communities with strategic initiatives where you're looking at changing systems and trying new ideas. Those same volunteers also look at how can United Way staff time contribute to community efforts. Can we be helpful in convening partners? Can we be helpful in contributing to work that partners are doing and being part of community initiatives? We also, in addition to volunteers making decisions around the types of work that we will do, we are also looking at ways to recruit volunteers within the community to support United Way's work and initiatives, but particularly to support the work of hundreds of nonprofits and organizations across the community. So those are some of the different types of things that we might do for our work, and all of that is overseen and directed and evaluated by volunteers from the community representing all 3 counties in our region.
And what's I think what's extremely interesting is the fact that there are some very important services and programs throughout the community that if it wasn't for United Way partially funding or fully funding that particular initiative, it would go away. And I think people need to understand how the United Way operates and how critical it is as a fabric of the community in trying to figure out, how best to utilize the funds.
I think the volunteers take that work so seriously. Yes. They work year-round as a team, engaging with the community, understanding the programs. They just completed a process of doing a review of all the programs to see what are the challenges, how are things going, what are the needs. So the volunteers feel very proud, and they should feel very proud of the work that they do to make those difficult decisions and to really understand the needs and respond to them.
Yeah. Now, Paul, you're a part of the United Way team that works in our community here locally. You're based here, and tell me about the role that you play and about some of the work that you're currently doing.
Well, first I have to tell you, on a personal note, how amazing it feels, and I just have the best job in the world. And mostly because being in all 3 counties and really getting a chance to work with some of our community partners and our community members who are just working to make a difference and really giving of themselves. The United Way really does things in a united way by bringing people in the community together, and it's just amazing to be a part of that. I think I'm part of a larger team, so our initiative team. So basically we go out into the community, and sometimes we're just listening for what some of the problems are and really getting to know the communities, because we really believe strongly that communities know what's best for them, and every community is a little bit different. And so we really try to go in and understand what the problems are. And then sometimes, so we're learning, sometimes we're going in and we're actually lending some elbow grease and helping. And then at other times we're identifying areas where United Way funding might help make a difference on a problem that a community is facing. And some examples of that might be right now I'm working with an amazing team in Alberg, and it is Alberg. They've trained me well. It's not Alberg, it's Alberg.
No?
It is an H.
Yeah.
Working with an amazing team down there. They just got a federal grant for $150,000 to ensure that children are ready for kindergarten. And so we're really working as a team with community partners there, with community members there, with care providers, folks from the schools, to just really identify what some of those barriers are. And I'm sure you can imagine, Joe, that there are many barriers that might get in the way of children being ready for kindergarten. And so it's really amazing to just be a part of this group, really trying to understand what are those barriers specific to Alberg, and then what are some of the solutions that really work for Alberg. And it's just an amazing process to be part of. And there are other places that are also working with a group in Richford, who is also just starting that process of looking at kindergarten readiness, and also here in Franklin County with Sheldon, with Swanton, and with Franklin City. So it's really one of the amazing examples of what we're doing. Another thing we're doing is working with teens in the Teen Institute, helping them to learn leadership skills and to come together with other students across the county, Franklin County, in order to enhance the wellness of their peers. And it's just so amazing to see those students and the skills and the potential that they have, and bringing those to bear to help their other students. It's just such a privilege. Another example is my colleagues working with foster grandparents across the 3 counties, and really matching those seniors in classrooms with students, and just hearing the amazing stories that come out of how they positively affect those students, and how the seniors are also positively affected. It's just every day, just hearing these stories and being part of this gives me great joy. And then I think working with a group of seniors in Richford right now to enhance some of the services for seniors. And it's a great example of seniors coming together to see what some of the problems are and to solve those problems. And it's just been an amazing experience. And I think a lot of folks sometimes think that the United Way is about just providing funding for programmings, which is an amazing part of what we do. But I think it's also equally valuable and important to have those staff in the community really listening and really helping bring our expertise and also our ears and our humble listening to try to bring the community together to solve their own problems. And I think for me personally, in a world where we listen to the news and it's really tough and we feel like there's just so many problems we hear about every day with no solutions, working in the community level with folks and really being part of those solutions, it's just a real honor. Makes me feel great every day.
Well, that's terrific. And you hit on something that I think is very important that some people don't understand, and that is when someone volunteers, no matter what the program is that's trying to help in the community, is that the individual that is volunteering and giving gets just as much as the individual that they're trying to help. And I think that gets lost in the mix. So for anyone who's never volunteered for an organization, I think if they gave it a chance, they would really feel something that they may never have felt before. It's an amazing, I think, transformation for someone.
I think so, and I think it's such a gift of vulnerability for someone to allow you to help them. And it's vulnerable to be able to say, I'm going to let you into my life, and I'm going to let you see my vulnerability and help. And just to be aware of that amazing gift that someone is giving you, and that opportunity to feel how great it is to give to someone. It is an amazing partnership. And then to see people really working hard to solve the problems in their community.
Yeah, you're right. It's all grassroots, and it's where things really do happen.
I agree.
It's really do happen. Now, among the NCSS programs over the years that the United Way has helped the organization with by funding, and it's very much appreciated, is Camp Rainbow. And this is a camp that was specifically started because young people on the autism spectrum and with other intellectual and developmental disabilities really didn't feel comfortable going to other camps because of their particular situation. So Camp Rainbow was started, and it's really with the help of the United Way that has been able to continue. Could you explain from the United Way's perspective why involvement in this initiative has been important?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that part of the United Way's goal and mission is that every student reach their full potential, and a recognition that everyone in our community has amazing value, and given that opportunity to reach their potential, it can give to the community and be a very successful part of our community. And I think in that situation, another value is really understanding that sometimes the classroom, enhancing experiences outside of the classroom, and for these students really to be able to be in a learning environment where it's safe, where they feel comfortable, where it's fun, and they're getting to to learn in a way that really meets their individual learning needs. I just think that's a powerful example, and that's my hope for all the students across the counties, and I think especially Camp Rainbow, we feel really great about being able to support that.
Well, I can tell you we greatly appreciate the partnership on that.
Joe, can I just add something? I
Yes.
think Camp Rainbow is one of many great examples of a community defining what it needs and wants and what's important, and then United Way responding by saying that we want to support that. And I think that's really our approach. Being part of the community is to say, if we want to achieve these shared outcomes of all children, youth, and young adults achieving their potential, for example, if we want to achieve that, what do we need and how can United Way support that? So I think it's a great example of the community defining its needs and its solutions.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. So again, we really appreciate that. Now, for over a decade, Vermont 211 has provided confidential referral services for many local residents that have needed assistance. Could you share the value of that service to our viewers?
Vermont 211 is such a hidden jewel, although certainly not for lack of trying to share the great news about it. It is an information and referral service that last year fielded, I believe, close to 39,000 calls from Vermonters. People can call 211 any time of day, any day of the week, and speak to a person and get information and referral related to a huge range of topics. Information about childcare, about senior services, legal assistance, transportation, health services, counseling, drug and alcohol programs, a huge range of information. You call and talk to a person who is highly trained, has access to all of the up-to-date, accurate information about services that you can access and resources that you can find out about. It's an amazing free service that I wish everybody would know about, and we take every opportunity to talk about. It's supported by the state of Vermont.
I was going to say
United
it's a
Ways of Vermont
statewide program.
Yes, anyone, anywhere in the state of Vermont can just dial 211. It's similar to calling 911, but it's not an emergency service. It's for dealing with everyday problems, difficult situations, and information needs that people might have.
Gotten such positive feedback from people who have accessed that service. They do receive a well-trained voice on the other end of the telephone.
I've used it myself. After talking about it in the community year after year, I've used it many times and worked with friends to use it at the same time. And they say, well, I guess I've heard about that. And I say, these are everyday situations where it's really helpful to call.
And you mentioned it is statewide, which I think is important for people to know that it is throughout the entire state of Vermont. However, I think they also need to understand that when you take it down and drill down to a local level, that's where the extreme value is to the local resident, which is those services that are available right in their own backyard that they may not be aware of.
And I think some important parts about that, Joe, just like to relay a story recently in working with the Teen Institute, spending 4 days with a group of teens. One of the most amazing moments I had was really sharing with them what some of the community resources were that they could help, because we know that teens are more likely to go to other teens. And giving them and explaining to them what 211 is, now they have the power to help their peers. If they're afraid to go to an adult, they have that confidential line that they can call. And also, I just want to point out the importance of programs making sure they are listed with 211, because any program can go and list themselves, and I think that's a great way to make sure that people do have access to your services.
And I think the other key word in this is confidential. So people don't have to feel, oh my goodness, somebody's gonna, Big Brother's gonna do whatever they're gonna do. The fact of the matter is, this is all confidential, and it's really an attempt to help people to get the resources that they need.
And the more information you give them on the phone, the better they are to be able to direct you. And I think trusting that you can do that is amazing.
There's a new feature to Vermont 211 in the last year or so called Help Me Grow, which is a way that any parents or caregivers or people working with young children or anyone who's pregnant can call and get access to child development specialists right there on the phone and ask any of the types of questions that any of us would have around caring for a child or having the experience of pregnancy, getting advice about behavior, about challenges, about resources. It's an amazing addition to the 211 resource, and I would really encourage, I wish they had had that when my kids were young, because you have questions every day and
Sure.
you don't always have a chance to, you call the doctor that day or try and get in. This is someone you can call right then and talk through a question you have or a situation you're trying to deal with and how to best support the development of that child.
That's terrific.
And also I would add translation services, that if there's someone where English as a first language is a struggle, that you can call 211 and get a translator to help you communicate. So if you're in an agency where suddenly you are struggling to communicate with someone that needs services, that's a great tool to use.
Sure, no, that's important as well, Paul. Very well. So, Vermont 211.
Yes.
Now, as we move forward, when people hear United Way of Northwest Vermont, what is the first thing that you want them to think of?
I think, and I don't know if my colleagues agree or not, but I bet they would.
We do.
You do. I think the first thing you want to do is think of that united word. And as you've heard throughout this discussion, it really is about peer-to-peer, working closely with your friends and neighbors and colleagues to develop effective tools so that people can work together to resolve challenges and, importantly, take advantage of opportunities. If there are things that are working well, how do we make sure they're sustained? As you mentioned, Camp Rainbow. So that's a long-winded answer, but focus on United. We are so fortunate to live where we live in a community that allows us such proximity and such access to each other that we really can solve things through conversation. And we've got a team of people who sit at those tables every day. And then, of course, long-winded, I also want people to think of how carefully their resources are being invested. And that we're strategic, we're responsive, we're focused on outcomes through our volunteers.
Well said. Well said. Well, believe it or not, we've come to the end of our time.
No.
So I told you it would be hard to believe. So with that being said, I want to thank my guests Molly Lambert, Amy Carmola, and Paul Chapman for being on the show today and sharing a sample of the great work that the United Way of Northwest Vermont collaborates to achieve with community partners, donors, and volunteers to make this a stronger community. I also want to thank you, the viewer, for spending time with us again this month. You can learn more about NCSS and all of our programs and services by logging on to ncssinc.org. I'm Joe Halko, and I'll be back next month with another episode of NCSS Here for You.
This has been another episode of NCSS Here for You. We hope that you found today's discussion informative and educational. Since 1958, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to high-quality services which promote healthy living and emotional well-being to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. Thanks once again for tuning in this month. NCSS's purpose remains creating a stronger community, one person at a time.